We're back with Green Mountain Mornings on KVT Talk, where Brattleboro listens. It's 24 minutes past the top of the hour. I'm your host, Olga Peters. If you are just joining me, I have Wendy Levy from the Commons on the phone. How are you, Wendy?
I'm good. How are you, Olga?
I am doing well. And we also have Nolan from BCTV in the studio. He's filming this segment today, and it will be online later at brattleboro.tv. And this segment of Green Mountain Mornings tonight is sponsored by Brattleboro Savings and Loan. Wendy, tell us about town meeting in Guilford and Newfane this year.
Sure. Yeah. So town meeting this year, two of the three towns that I was responsible for that day, their town meetings went by really quickly. We're going to talk about it kind of backwards. My day started in Putney, but since that's the most complicated, we're going to talk about that toward the end of the show. But
yes.
I ended my day at Guilford, and I got there, I guess, around noon, and their town meeting was over. People were eating lunch. People were still voting. But I did manage to check in with Rick Zamore, who is the town moderator. I talked to at least one select board member. I checked in with Sarah Coffey, who does a number of things in town. But their town meeting went really smoothly, from what those sources tell me. There was some debate on the climate resolution, the fossil fuel thing. That it's an advisory article that a couple towns did. Putney did it, I think, and maybe, did I vote on it in Brattleboro? I sure did. I did Brattleboro, too. So that had a little bit of debate and a couple of dissenting votes. The other article in Guilford that had quite a bit of discussion was about CEVED's funding, because some folks pointed out that funding per person, which is how CEVED's request, that's the Southeastern Vermont, what is it again? Southeastern Vermont Economic Development something. Strategy, thank you.
You're welcome.
So many acronyms.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, yes, CEVED's, which is, easier to say than all those other words, the way that they request money through town is a per person amount. So Guilford is paying, or the request was for them to pay $3 per person. Well, someone had found out, and it's public record, you don't have to dig, that Brattleboro was paying $2 per resident. And Guilford said, wait a minute, why are we paying more than Brattleboro? That doesn't make sense. Well, apparently, Brattleboro is paying $2 because even though CEVED's requested $3, Brattleboro said we're paying $2. And so if Guilford wanted to pay $2, it could, and someone did attempt to amend that article, but that failed. So Guilford is still sending $3 a person to CEVED. So it's, I want to say it's like $6,300. And some folks questioned, why are we sending so much money to them? Why not send money to organizations that are actually doing direct services to, to people who are in need?
That's a fair question.
It still passed. So there was that.
Did you?
Let's see. Yep.
Quickly.
Sure.
I remember there was an agenda item on the Windham Regional Commission.
Yeah.
And whether the town would continue working with them. Do you know what happened with that one?
It passed. Everything passed that day. Yeah, and nobody told me there was any debate about that. And I know in the past couple years, there's been some conversation during the select board meetings where they're preparing for town meeting and talking about the budget. There was some question as to whether it's worth it, especially because it was, I think, either last year or the year before, Windham Regional had asked for a little bit more. But other select board members pointed out that working with Windham Regional brings the town much more money than they pay in the assessment, because Windham Regional helps them with some grants, like for a variety of projects, including road stuff. So it was really worth it. So I'm not certain. I don't think the debate happened again at this year's select board meeting. Some of the budget meetings weren't on BCTV, so I didn't catch all of them. But that had no problem passing at town meeting.
And just quickly before we head to the local news, how about Newfane?
Yeah, so Newfane, when I got to their town meeting, oh gosh, when did I get there? Maybe around 10:30, 11 o'clock, something like that. Maybe a little later, yeah, maybe 11. Their town meeting, they had gotten through all the articles, and they were just doing announcements and unscheduled members of the public, that sort of thing. But after talking to the administrative assistant and a couple of residents who attended, that meeting also went quickly. There was the debate was more positive. The thing that seemed to get a lot of discussion was about funding the fire department. So Newfane in the past had sent $20,000 every budget year to the South Newfane Williamsville Fire Department. Well, that fire department closed.
Right.
And so, they didn't have to send that money over this year, but some folks from the floor said, hey, since that fire department closed, Newbrook Fire Department has been shouldering that responsibility when those calls come in that fire station used to service. Now Newbrook Fire Department is servicing that. They should get that $20,000. Well, someone else didn't think that was good enough and said, no, they should get $30,000 more. So
hey.
I think Newbrook ended up getting I can't remember if it was $30,000 or $50,000 from the town that they weren't expecting.
That's a nice bit of news.
Yeah, people were not arguing. People were I don't even know if you'd call it a debate, but the discussion was around how much people really loved and supported and appreciated their fire department. So rock on, Newfane. And there were three articles that failed. Town clerk Carol Hesselback, who was elected last year, so now she's going into her second year, she petitioned to have three offices, three positions turned from 1-year terms to 3-year terms, and that was town clerk, treasurer, and collector of delinquent taxes. And her argument is it's really hard for a person to have any continuity if they have to, go for election every year, especially in a town clerk, because that's a steep learning curve. And so she wanted townspeople to vote on that. Well, those were all defeated. And unfortunately, I think that what happened in Putney with their town clerk and treasurer informed that. Because from what my sources told me, the talk on the floor was, we don't want to extend the term for an elected official that's not accountable, really, or there's no recall mechanism. Nobody can mind them, because if we're stuck with somebody who's either doing a terrible job or who's going to abandon the post, we're stuck with them for 3 years. So those all failed.
Thank you, Wendy, for that update. We have to go to the local news now, but Wendy and I will return after the break. We're back with Green Mountain Mornings on KVT Talk, where Brattleboro listens. Welcome back to my guest, Wendy Levy from the Commons, and I am your host, Olga Peters. So, Wendy, tell me about Putney's town meeting.
Yeah. So I wanted to get to the Putney town meeting early this year. So for folks who don't know, I cover a variety of towns in the Commons in the town and village section. So the towns that I cover currently are Putney, Newfane, Dummerston, Guilford, and I also cover Brattleboro. So that means that I go to those select board meetings, and where applicable, I go to the town meetings. Well, for town meeting day, I don't have to go to Dummerston because Joyce Marcel covers that for our paper because she lives there, so that makes it easy. And then, Randy Holhut, who's, our deputy news editor, he also goes to that one and takes pictures and such. So I don't have to cover Dummerston. So that leaves me with 3 town meetings to go to on town meeting day, which is a little hard because they all started about the same time. And I haven't figured out how to, like, divide myself physically. So I just drive around and, you know, hope that I catch something or somebody from all of them. But this year I wanted to come to Putney early because the Board of Civil Authority was meeting an hour before town meeting was supposed to start because they didn't have a presiding official for town meeting because the former town clerk and treasurer, Denise German, had resigned at midnight the night before.
Right.
And so there's nobody to run elections when there's like a hand count from the floor, or if there's if someone calls for an Australian ballot count from the floor, like if something's really close or whatever, you know, the town clerk is one of the people responsible for counting those votes. There's nobody to submit the election results to the press and to the Secretary of State's office. They needed somebody, right. And they couldn't appoint anybody before that because they didn't. They hadn't known for very long that she was resigning. So I wanted to go to that Board of Civil Authority meeting just to see how it went, but also because I think this is a really interesting thing that towns haven't actually really had to deal with before, which is what happens when you're left without somebody to run this meeting with kind of short notice. So the Board of Civil Authority, it's their responsibility to make sure that somebody, is doing that, and that board is made up of the town's justices of the peace, and Putney has 10 of them. It's the select board members, it's the town moderator, and then it's the town agent. So, so that meeting went well. And again, it was interesting watching elected officials, watching public servants really try to navigate statute, which sometimes isn't written so clearly.
It's written in
any of us who ever had to read statute know. One public official told me it's written in Old English. And I think they're right.
Yeah, Greek.
Yeah, but the people, the Board of Civil Authority members, they were working together really well. They asked really good questions. It was clear to me that they really cared about what was going on and wanted to make a good decision using the best information that they could find. And, but who's going to do this? So, and also how long should their term be? That was a big question, because what some of the select board members were saying is, if any of the ballot items or the agenda items or anything about the election or town meeting at all gets recalled or petitioned, if anybody challenges it, they then need somebody in that position to handle that too, and that would normally be the town clerk's responsibility. So, they weren't appointing a town clerk. They were really clear about that. That's not what the Board of Civil Authority was doing. But what they ended up doing was appointing longtime former town clerk Anita Coombs to run elections that day, because she'd done it for a really long time. She agreed to do it. So that's what ended up happening. But just watching the process, to me, was something that was really fascinating, because I'm a nerd and I think municipal governance is very interesting.
I agree with you.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. These are all volunteers, and this is what they're doing. I mean, I don't know, maybe some, like the select board gets a stipend, but it's not really a job that pays. So yeah, and then town meeting itself, I wasn't able to stay at very much of it because I had my other towns to go to, but I was able to stick around for the representatives to give their reports, and I got an update from some folks later on who were there about what happened. And there was a lot of debate, but all of all of the motions, all the agenda items, articles, sorry, all the articles passed that day, including things about, tax-exempt properties and things like that.
Wendy, one of the articles on Putney's warning, if I remember it correctly, was whether to turn the town clerk's and town treasurer position from an elected to an appointed position.
Yes, that is correct. And those two items were decided by Australian ballot, and I'm pretty sure that's covered in statute, that's how they have to go. Mm-hmm. And those both passed, so the select board is responsible for appointing a person or two people, somebody to do both, to do those jobs. And I believe at Wednesday's night select board meeting, they were going to do that, but I can't confirm that. That's a meeting that I rarely attend live. I usually watch it on BCTV, and shout out yet again to BCTV for making my job possible.
Yes, allowing you to be in more than one place.
So many of my select boards happen at the meetings happen at the same time or during times that I can't be there. And if it weren't for BCTV, I couldn't do my job.
Yay,
so,
BCTV.
Yeah, I know, yay,
yes.
BCTV. But anyway, I haven't seen the video, I haven't seen the feed for that meeting yet, and I haven't talked to anybody on the select board or in the town offices, so I'm not sure if they appointed somebody yet, but now they are tasked with doing so because those articles passed, I want to say, the vote was like in the low 200s to maybe like 70. I don't want to give you bad numbers, but it was overwhelmingly clear that it was not a close race in either the town clerk or the treasurer's question about making it an appointed rather than elected. And so what that means basically for people who are unfamiliar, so most towns in Vermont elect their town clerk and their treasurer. The people, all the townspeople, all the voters decide. Some towns, if it's in their charter, and Putney doesn't have a town charter, some towns appoint, the legislative body appoints the town clerk and or the treasurer. And I believe Brattleboro is one of those, right?
Yes, Brattleboro is one of those.
So that means that it's a select board. Is it in Brattleboro, is it the select board or the town manager's office that hires the town clerk? Do you know?
I believe what happens is the town manager and staff will go through the hiring process, but I think the select board has the final say on on who the final person is.
So they do the final approval or the appointment. Yeah.
I believe so, yeah.
So up until last May, a town that didn't have a charter and that, elected, because statute says you elect a town clerk and treasurer, had to do that, which meant that because that person was an elected official, there was no recall mechanism. If they weren't doing their job well, there was, the select board had no say in the matter, neither did the town manager, nobody. They would get to fill the rest of their term and screw things up. The only way to get rid of them would be at next elections, and you vote them out of office. Well, last May, the legislature passed a law, and now it's in statute, that at town meeting, if the majority of the voters say so, can change the town clerk and treasurer's positions from elected to appointed, which means that they are basically a regular employee. And in Putney's case, it's the select board that gets to hire and and manage and, if necessary, fire a town clerk or a treasurer. And that's what they decided.
Wow. And so it sounds like either at this past Wednesday meeting or at a future meeting, they will appoint the person. Did they have a hiring process or?
Yeah, they're kind of working on it. What the last that I heard was that they were going to appoint an interim town clerk and treasurer, while they kind of work out the job description. That's the last I heard. It may not be the most up-to-date information.
Okay.
And as I get more information on it, I will report on it in the paper. But, they're, excuse me, they have legal counsel, and they're working with the Vermont League of Cities and Towns and the Secretary of State's office, but everybody's kind of figuring this out together. And it's somewhat uncharted waters for municipalities in the state, especially because this law is pretty new. It was only passed in May.
Right.
So they're all kind of working. They're all navigating it together. I'm still learning about how this all works and what they're doing. So are they.
Wow, and it's actually pretty amazing considering how long Putney has been around as a town that they haven't dealt with this before.
Well, the funny thing is, nobody has. When this whole thing came about, when I learned that the town clerk and treasurer stopped showing up for her job but didn't resign, I thought, wow, what does a town do? Well, I'm going to call the Secretary of State's office because I'm sure, as you know, as a reporter, the Secretary of State's office is a really great resource.
Yeah, and they have a lot of the good answers.
Yeah, they have a lot of good answers, and they tell you when they don't know, which is really helpful. It's nice to have somebody who knows what they know but doesn't try to make it up otherwise, because they're not legislators. So when I called up there, I was like, oh, the Secretary of State, somebody in that office is going to tell me that, other towns have dealt with this and here's what they've done.
Yeah, step
when
one,
I called and I talked to Deputy Secretary of State Chris Winters, he said, wow, really? That he hadn't heard anything about it at that point because the story hadn't really broken yet because I was the one who broke it.
Yes, you were.
He said that's strange. Let me talk to some other folks in the office who, he said, I've been here a while, but there are people who've been here longer. Let's see if anybody's ever heard of this. Well, when I talked to him after that, he said that nobody in the office had ever heard of any situation in the state where a town clerk abandoned their post and didn't resign.
Wow.
So this is all really new.
Well, kudos to you and kudos to all the folks in Putney who have been working on this issue and trying to sort it out. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me.
We're going to head on off I'm going to hand you off to the weather, and I will return after the break.